for joining us. I'm Thomas McGee, and this is a special report from Enumclaw News. The State versus Malcolm Frazier trial reached its conclusion with closing arguments on Tuesday, giving the state and defense the final opportunity to present their case before the jury's deliberation. Defense attorney Ann Carey went into various details that were brought out throughout the duration of the trial. She recounted witnesses' testimony and displayed for all how the evidence she presented fit together. Later, during Carey's closing arguments, she gave the jury 10 detailed reasons to doubt that Frazier had committed the crimes for which he was charged. For each, she went into great lengths to lay out why each one could stand alone to demonstrate Frazier's innocence.
Doubt. You only need one reason to doubt. However, in this case, there is enough doubt that you each can have your own reason. This case is filled with reasonable doubt. I've identified 10 reasons to doubt. First, the prosecution is relying on the statement of alone. There is no proof. Second, the Fraziers did not live with the Gambles as alleged. Third, the state's witnesses have testified as to their belief of when the Fraziers lived with the Gambles. Vague beliefs that are not anchored in any record or in any photograph. Fourth, doesn't have information she would have if these allegations were true. She doesn't know Malcolm Frazier is an uncircumcised male. She doesn't know that he has a congenital anomaly called phimosis. Mr. Frazier would not be able to engage in the alleged conduct involving his penis without distinct and immediate pain. Fifth, yells and screams during each incident night after night for 6 months, and no one hears a thing. Sixth, the story is implausible. It defies common sense. She has told you what she believes a molestation or a rape should look like. Consider her demeanor on the stand. 7, the integrity of this investigation is compromised by Detective McCall's personal religious opposition to what he perceives is the theology of Sound Doctrine Church. And that perception has impacted his judgment. He was untrained in sexual abuse interviews, and interviews, as was done by Detective McCall, should not be happening in the 21st century, according to Dr. Ewell. Detective McCall interviewed her the next day, and without any further investigation, arrested Malcolm Frazier. 8, the bias against Sound Doctrine Church and Malcolm Frazier was evident throughout this trial. 75% of the state's witnesses were biased against Malcolm Frazier and Sound Doctrine Church, including Detective McCall. 9, I want you to consider the statements to. They're very different, and a marked difference between version, and I'll explain more about that. The final reason is the absence of evidence you would expect if the allegations were true. Absent in this case are any displays of fear or concern for her sisters or concern for the Dean children that later lived with Malcolm Frazier.
After the lunch recess, Carey connected with the jury and didn't even feel the need to continue with reasons why Frazier was innocent. Instead, she pointed out the obvious fact that the state's case was falling apart.
Thank you for coming back. Hear me drone on. Why? Because it's important. It means everything to Mr. Frazier. This case is so important. It can't be understated. The state's failure to prove the case cannot be overstated. Over the noon hour, I thought of even more reasons to doubt, but I'm going to spare you because I know you have this. I know you get it, and I know you've been paying careful attention. But a couple of comments about Mr. Simmons' closing remarks. We heard today from Mr. Simmons, for the first time, a new theory of the government's case. He said, it doesn't matter if it was 7 months or 7 weeks. They didn't testify. It happened for 7 weeks. The state, Mr. Simmons, knows that he has problems.
Simmons stated that Ezekiel Dean testified that the complainant wasn't involved in anti-sound doctrine meetings.
But was not involved in any of that. When there would be meetings, when there would be conversations about the church, she would avoid them. She wasn't part of it. Even the Ezekiel and Anna Dean testified that when they saw her, Ezekiel testified that, she wasn't part of any of this conversation, this anti-church stuff.
This is a lie. What Ezekiel actually said was that he was at the bottom of the stairs praying for his sister Anna while she was being harassed by ex-church members.
When that occurrence that you talked about, Thanksgiving at the Dean's house, wasn't really involved in the conversations about the church, was she?
I do not remember because I was sitting at the bottom of the stairs, praying for my sister.
But Simmons couldn't allow the actual crimes against Ezekiel and Anna to get in the way of his storytelling. So he conveniently left them out of his closing arguments. Again, the kids actually being abused are of no consequence to Simmons, only those making up allegations. When addressing the interview of Detective McCall, which was called absolutely terrible by Dr. John Ewell, Simmons decided to throw all evidence by the wayside. When testifying, Dr. Ewell stated that all of the allegations came from the detective.
This idea that these memories are planted is borderline kind of ridiculous. There's no suggestion that that's the case.
And every allegation comes from the detective. He's the one who suggests all of the things that happen. I mean, this entire interview is not acceptable. Every single alleged act is suggested first by the officer. And
what was Simmons' response to this powerful statement by the expert witness? That which equaled an argument made by a kid on a playground.
Defense says that the investigation was so terrible and that Detective McCall is biased. So what? So what?
So what? So what if an innocent man goes to jail? So what if my case doesn't have any evidence to support it? Really, America? Really, Washington? Is this what your tax dollars pay for? For a state-appointed prosecuting attorney to throw evidence out the window and exclaim, so what? You deserve better.
Defense says that the investigation was so terrible and that Detective McCall is biased. So what? So what?
Hillary Clinton's now famous one-liner shows the governmental lack of concern for the average American. She stated when confronted with the individuals killed in Benghazi, "What difference does it make?" Jason Simmons' version, "So what?" No, Mr. Simmons, not so what. Despite the fact that Jason Simmons, Rich Anderson, and the King County Prosecutor's Office is more concerned with winning than with upholding justice in a court of law, facts and evidence do matter. At least that's what Judge Lori K. Smith told the jurors during their instructions. Anne clearly demonstrated during her arguments that the state had the burden of proving its case beyond a reasonable doubt. What was Mr. Simmons' compelling proof? That the allegations were simply true. No mention of evidence. The jury was just supposed to take his word for it.
This isn't a conspiracy. The alternative is that it's just simply true. that it's just simply true.
If credible testimony is all that's required, as Simmons states, the Salem witch trial would be considered a proper legal proceeding.
Believable testimony is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It has to be.
The Salem witch trials, for those who don't know, was a series of allegations made against individuals by those who did not like them in order to have them hanged or burned at the stake. No evidence was required at the Salem witch trials, only credible testimony. Again, Simmons threw the court's instructions and the high standard of burden of proof out the window for what he was hoping would be a compelling performance.
Believable testimony is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It has to be.
It's clear that the King County Prosecutor's Office has been getting away with ignoring constitutional rights for far too long. Jason Simmons has called 12 out of 16 witnesses who did nothing but attack a church. Once Simmons reached his closing arguments, he made it clear that the church did not matter. Our tax dollars pay prosecutors to convict real criminals, not attack the religious beliefs of American citizens. The Frazier case had a stark contrast from how the justice system was intended to work. It wasn't the state presenting evidence to suggest guilt as the law demands, but the defense providing mountains of evidence to the contrary for which the state had to scramble to discredit. Simmons' case was about attempting to bring reasonable doubt to the defense's evidence. What a reversal when full burden of proof lies on the prosecutor, proof which was all but absent from the courtroom. It's time for us to begin holding individuals from the King County Prosecutor's Office accountable for their actions. Jason Simmons and Rich Anderson, both of whom were present for closing arguments, knew full well they had no evidence, yet decided to move forward with a trial anyways. With actions this unconstitutional, no one is safe, and it's our duty as Americans to ensure the proper steps are taken for its reform. Again, I'm Thomas McGee with Enumclaw News, news you can act on. So long.